Right, I'm gonna come out and come back in.
Yeah, no, it's going. Hold on. Oh, there you go.
Oh, good, you are live now. I still see a status. Okay, it started. We are now live. I'm not getting any visual indication here if we're actually live. So I'm going to.
Yeah. No, I guess we're live. Maybe if somebody could in the chat. Yes, you are live. Okay.
Okay, great. All right, thanks everybody. I apologize. The first time we kicked this off, it told us it had failed to start, so we had to kick it off again. So anyway, welcome everybody. Sorry we're a few minutes late here. Thank you for joining us today to talk about Children's Hospital of Wisconsin and the lessons learned that they found after 18 months on PeopleSoft on OCI. Unfortunately, they had scheduling conflicts and some other issues, so they couldn't actually attend the conference. But we are going to be channeling them today and sharing our perspective as well as what we've heard from them in terms of the lessons learned that they've seen over the course of a couple years now on OCI. All right, so Millie, I'll have you introduce yourself and then I'll introduce myself.
All right, great. Thanks, Cameron. Yes, so hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Millie Babbage. At least that's my nickname. Miroslava is my legal name, which is always a little difficult for some people to pronounce. But I am a managing director at Spear MC, and I have worked for the company about 14 years now. Prior to joining Spear, I was at KPMG Consulting, aka the old Bearing Point. During my time in both organizations, I've worked mostly with the PeopleSoft product at various clients across numerous industries. Actually, I believe I started my career with like version 5.0, which is, I guess, really dating myself and so forth. But hopefully, really love the product, and hopefully Oracle continues to invest in it. Okay, Cameron.
Great. Thanks, Millie. Yeah, so I'm Cameron McClurg. I've been also working with PeopleSoft since the late 90s. The most of my career up until just a couple of years ago was spent really on your side of the fence. I was a customer, an Oracle customer. I learned the application within a couple of organizations. I moved around. I managed our internal teams doing implementations, new projects, new features, upgrades, etc. And I hopped around a couple different companies doing PeopleSoft work. I started to build on that and branch into other non-PeopleSoft solutions, including Hyperion and EPM space. But PeopleSoft was kind of my bread and butter, kind of my thing I've done for a long time. About 3 years ago, I hopped the fence and decided to join the consulting world. So I really wanted to take what I was doing within an organization, building teams and building projects and selling the ideas and the functions and new features and support. I want to take that to a consulting world so I could do it for a lot of companies. And that's what I'm doing now. I get to work with a lot of you building either new projects or managed services. I'm really excited about OCI. I've learned OCI since I've come to the consulting world, and am just thrilled with how easy it is to use OCI, how easy it is to integrate OCI with your network and build PeopleSoft and solutions on OCI. So I've kind of covered that over the last couple of years for Spear MC, as well as our managed services work that we do. So that's kind of my background. Spear MC, as many of you have already probably are aware of, we are involved in quite a little bit of everything, and I'm having a little tough time moving my slides. Hold on one second. All right, there we go. Really, SpearMC we try to do everything is needed for PeopleSoft customers. So we're all in on PeopleSoft. We do everything that would be needed for PeopleSoft, whether that's training, licensing, managed services, hosting, PTF, new implementations, new functionalities, PUM updates, tests and service. All of that we do for our Oracle PeopleSoft customers. We've achieved our specializations in everything we can for PeopleSoft. We do have work that we do with Hyperion, but it's really a pretty small segment of what we actually do. Really, PeopleSoft is really our bread and butter, and we're very pleased to be doing still be working with PeopleSoft after all these years. Started in 2004. I started later, of course, but really, SpearMC coast to coast, we offer services around the country. Although I would say in the new world of COVID, the physical offices that we have aren't really that important anymore. We have resources all over the country and the world supporting our customers wherever they exist. Most of our work is obviously remote at this point. We're also very proud of the fact that Gartner about a year ago put out a very nice sort of analysis around taking a look again at OCI as a very serious contender in the cloud infrastructure space. About a year ago, they did that, and they followed up this year with a market guide for Oracle for professional and managed services partners in this space. Very pleased to say that we were included in that, and so we are able to use all of the learnings we've had over the last few years in OCI to get some recognition for that. So we're very pleased about that. And last one, before we get to the actual content, we got a ton of presentations we're doing. These are all presentations. We're all in on this conference, as you can see. We've already completed a few sessions today. I will say, if you're looking for more information specifically and more of a deep dive on OCI, come to my session tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 Pacific. That's going to be a lot more specific to the components of PeopleSoft and OCI. Today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about Children's, what they did, their experience, their lessons learned. For more specific about PeopleSoft on OCI and a deep dive in there, come to my session tomorrow. It's going to go into a lot more detail on OCI. And I'm doing chatbots on Thursday as well, if you're interested in that. But of course, anything else, we really have it covered with respect to pretty much all. This kind of represents everything we do with PeopleSoft. So we're very pleased to be one of the major sponsors here. Okay, so let's talk about Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. So they're a pretty major not-for-profit healthcare system, obviously located in Milwaukee or in Wisconsin. They are a major affiliate of Medical College of Wisconsin, and also affiliated with more than a dozen schools of nursing. They're really one of the nation's top pediatric facilities and have served kids and families from all 50 states, not just from the region. The institute that they have represents the most powerful concentration of pediatric research, 1,000 clinical trials, and $25 million external funding. Having spent some time there, children's hospitals are really some of the greatest organizations that we have as a society, I would say. And I think we'd all agree on that, the work that they do and the mission that they have. And so we're very, very pleased to have been able to work with them and very proud of our partnership. So let's talk a bit about their PeopleSoft footprint. So now they're currently on 9.2 HCM 858. They weren't at the time, 18 months ago or a couple years ago we started working with them. But now they're on 858 HCM tools, and then Image 33 for HCM. Then on financials, 856 and Image 26, and with current plans to move to 858 and Image 38. 6,000 employees and production database around 500 gigabytes. So and nine non-prod databases per pillar. So it just kind of gives you a bit of a feel for what they are. You can compare that to kind of what you have, your organization, whether you're running HCM, financials, maybe the two together, that sort of thing. So PeopleSoft really runs better on the cloud, and so Children's kind of realized this, but they realized at the time when they were trying to figure out how they were going to solve some specific challenges that they had. And specifically, this is something that you hear from a lot of organizations, and specifically for them, this is a big deal. First off, aging infrastructure. They had no DR strategy or solution in place. They, of course, were doing backups and that sort of thing, but really from an overall comprehensive DR solution, they really didn't have one. And really, they were coming to the end of life of their hardware and software, and that was really a huge concern for them. Lack of vendor-supported updates and patches, and lack of technical support. So really a convergence of several very technical, mostly infrastructure-driven challenges. And this is something we see from, of course, a lot of companies who are dealing with either aging infrastructure or perhaps a move strategically for that organization away from administering the software that powers the business. So, and these are some of the challenges that they had, that you may have as well, with respect to end-of-life technology. Not only are you going to, your costs are going to go up. That can mean something like premier support versus kind of a standard support. And we're not talking just PeopleSoft, we're talking infrastructure, we're talking middleware, we're talking sometimes database, et cetera. That not only costs you more with actual hard dollars, it costs you more with respect to more human labor. So spending more time on keeping systems and infrastructure up. At the same time, you're dealing with poor performance and reliability, with a lack of, taking advantage of the current and increased performance that you get with newer technology. Of course, compliance issues, incompatibility. I know this firsthand from when we tried at one of my organizations that I worked at, trying to figure out what browser would be supported for one application when that browser didn't work for another application. And all of these applications were really pretty old. And so the lack of being able to bring that software and that hardware forward created challenges, the incompatibility of different software packages. And then one of the biggest, and certainly not the least here, is the security vulnerabilities that will come with the lack of patching. So if we have old hardware, old middleware, old database, so if that patching ends, you have a real threat there to the security. These are all some of the risks that are associated with end of life, and they were dealing with these things, and really felt that it was becoming a significant risk for the continuity of their ability to serve the organization with their applications. So they really want to move towards, upgrading legacy server-based PeopleSoft platform to really that next generation cloud solution hosted on OCI. They will talk about it in a second, but they really wanted to approach this from they wanted to improve some things, but they really wanted to like for like and really take their internal personnel, make sure these personnel are then supporting, but just on different infrastructure. So it wasn't a significant change with respect to how they looked at the software or how they looked at supporting the software. They just needed that next gen platform that OCI could provide. They wanted fast connection. So Fast Connect is the product that Oracle provides that allows a direct connection from their network to the Oracle network, the OCI network. So they use the Fast Connect, which I'll talk a little bit more in a second. And then really they wanted to leverage the DR capabilities of OCI by simply choosing to architect it with a multi-region DR strategy, which is something you just get to choose to do versus when you're on-prem needing to contract with another organization and do all this type of stuff where you kind of build a DR solution that's very, very challenging and much more difficult to build out a DR plan on-prem. So the approach to the implementation was really, and we start with this one, it's very important. This company, Children's, wanted to really leverage internal resources. It was not a situation where they wanted a partner to come in and just kind of do it for them. They had a significant team there that had been managing PeopleSoft for quite some time, both from an infrastructure perspective, overall technology, architecture, development, all of that. They weren't looking at this as a means to reduce their footprint of personnel in any way. They really wanted to leverage the expertise they had in-house, but take advantage of the features, because they were really, in some ways, with that on-prem footprint, they were holding those people back from really being able to do their best in creating a solution that would serve the hospital. So they utilized a lift and shift methodology that was really a tailored lift and shift methodology. 2 years ago, there was lift and shift was a feature as part of Cloud Manager, still is, but at the time it was a little bit buggy. There were some restrictions on how it could be used, and so they didn't use the lift and shift feature as part of PeopleSoft Cloud Manager. Instead, they used kind of a modified lift and shift strategy that was a collaboration between Oracle and Spear MC, who worked together to really build an actual approach to taking their on-prem footprint and moving it over to the cloud infrastructure. A key part of the implementation approach was making sure that they looked at this project and said, how do we do this in a way that puts us onto a path to stay current in the future? So they wanted to leverage PeopleSoft test framework to do that in order to really increase the cycle time and being able to get your PUM image updates much faster. You really need to invest in your ability to do automated testing, to do regression testing very fast. And so they wanted to invest in that, and so building out PTF was part of their solution or part of their project approach. I would say between that and then leveraging internal folks and really getting them up to speed with OCI, between those two things, the project was essentially longer than it needed to be, but or it could have been, I should say. But their approach to it was really, we're doing this with a long-term vision of leveraging our internal resources and building out this automation with PTF that will allow us to have a really solid approach to the future. And I would say they made a conscious decision to spend a little more time, invest a little bit more time in the initial project than what they could have. So they worked with us, and our product we call Cloud Shift, and essentially that is working with clients to look at needs analysis, planning, sizing. We're quite a bit on the pricing and building out the bill of materials that would be a projection of potential costs when you move to OCI. We work with them, of course, then on the lift and shift. And there's really two approaches to that. You either can take that sort of on-prem footprint and simply move it over and keep everything you've got, even keep your licenses. You can do all of that and just move it over. Or you can, what we consider that move and improve, where you're considering updates to some of your footprint, leveraging some of the platform services that exist, and I'll talk about that in a second. So that's the kind of the approach they went, and I'll show you kind of some of the things that they did. We offer hosting with respect to looking at PeopleSoft on OCI, so actually being the provider. So and we've actually got another client that I'll speak to, a success story at the very end of this one, talk about how we do hosting for another client. Setting up Cloud Manager, in this case with Children's, they did not utilize Cloud Manager at the outset. And then, of course, full lifecycle management. Once you're up on OCI, we offer the full support of the lifecycle management. So it's patching and keeping you current, all the rest of it. So the way they approach it was they really wanted to spend, again, a lot of time in training. So we spent, I think it was a little bit over a week of deep dive training for them. We didn't even get to the design of the application. We just spent time training them up on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure 101, what it looks like to deploy PeopleSoft on OCI. Spent some time on Cloud Manager, on the methodologies around PUM, which is not necessarily specific to OCI, at least it wasn't at the time, but we spent some time on that. And then, of course, some significant time spent on hardening from a security perspective. And again, the strategy here was to really invest in their people and letting them take not only an active role, but almost a leadership role in the process of moving to OCI. And that was really a conscious decision on their part to come at it from a long-term health approach. So their source system, you can see kind of on the left side here, they kind of had a mix of Windows and AIX platforms on their back end. They also had different database versions between 12.2 and 12.1 between the two environments. For the most part, they wanted to keep everything similar. However, they did move to Linux, which is what we highly recommend for people to do, to not look at the infrastructure, just say take everything you do currently and just move it over to this new infrastructure. But consider moving to for PeopleSoft at least, a combination of Windows and Linux to support your PeopleSoft footprint. And if you come to my session tomorrow, I'll talk more about what Oracle's doing with autonomous Linux, et cetera. But the other thing they did was they brought their database on the HCM side up to the same version, so they could have one platform, 12.2. And I'll talk in the lessons learned about what they did with that database. They're no longer in 12.2. They're actually moved up to 19 and found to be very, very easy. I'll talk about that here in a second. This slide is an eye chart, and I totally get it, but I want to just use it. I actually thought about just getting rid of it and giving you some bullet points, but I think there's some value to kind of taking a look at this. Couple things I'll point out, and I am not I don't come from a technical background. I come from a functional background. So I'm going to try to point out things that might be relevant to you as a functional person. So the first thing to know is that your on-prem data center, your on-prem network, let's say, is connected to the Oracle network. When your people are on site, on-prem, and logged into your network, when they go to PeopleSoft, they have no idea that PeopleSoft software might not be in their network. They don't care. And I've always said, in the past, when you have a complete 100% on-prem network footprint, people move data centers all the time. I mean, I remember as a user, I would get notified that the servers moved from one part of the campus to another part of the campus, and it was essentially a non-event as a user. I think of it the same way. As a user, you don't really care where your application exists as long as you can get access to it. And that's the key here. If you're an infrastructure person or an IT, let's say a director or a VP in IT, you're going to care a lot about this. As a functional user, you don't care as long as you can get access to it. So that's the key, is that the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Network is connected to your on-prem. Now, they opted for what's called Fast Connect, which gives them a dedicated pipeline using a company called Equinix, which is a third party that basically provides a dedicated pipeline between your on-prem data center and the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Network. That dedicated pipeline ensures that there's no traffic issues, that you have a consistent experience. They opted for the 1 gigabit per second level. And again, this is not absolutely required for all customers. For some customers like them, they didn't want to take any chances, and they want to just lock that in from the very beginning. Other customers might have a much smaller footprint and less traffic going back and forth. And so for them, they might go with the free option, which is essentially just a free called IPsec VPN tunnel, which is just a tunnel that connects your data center to the outside Oracle Cloud Network. Again, that's a free VPN connection. You don't spend any money for that. If that's not going to cut it from a data transfer and speed and performance perspective, you can opt to go into a fast connect type of situation. And for that, you have 3 options now: 1, 10, or 100 gigabit per second. So typically with PeopleSoft customers, we don't see the need to go to 10 or 100 unless you're extremely large organization with a lot of back and forth between your on-prem network and PeopleSoft. But typically, PeopleSoft is not the type of application that's going to be creating a ton of data going back and forth. So bottom line is that's an option, and there's also not just performance, but some other sort of security elements that can help sort of ease the stress of building that connection. So for your IT folks who care about such things. The second thing I'll point out is if you see the top and the bottom here, you have 2 different regions. And in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, that means 2 different data centers. One is in Virginia and one's in Phoenix, so East Coast, West Coast. Those are the 2 main regions. They actually have a 3rd region now in the Bay Area, but there's only 1 availability domain there. So the 2 main regions are still Ashburn and Phoenix. In these 2 regions, you have multiple availability domains, which essentially is isolated, fault tolerant sort of failover type situation within one region. But you also, so you can build it to, your environment to essentially have failover within one region, but you can also then do what they've done, which is this DR strategy of replicating both their servers and their database to a secondary region. So with DataGuard and with rsync, they're keeping all of that in sync to a secondary region. And by doing that, if that first region goes down, or for whatever reason the connection to the first region goes down, they can fail over to the second region and stand up from a DR perspective. But traditionally, you're not doing that, and it's only really would be a disaster to have to do that. In normal times, you're simply using that first region, and you can see that they've built their financials database and their HCM database in that primary region. The other thing I'll point out is load balancing is just a feature that you can just turn on. You don't actually have to procure and use an F5 load balancer or any other third-party product for load balancing. Load balancing is essentially a feature that you just get to use. And tomorrow I'll talk more about some of the features that you get access to in OCI. But when you really move to OCI, it's not just infrastructure. You really get access to a lot of platform utilities and tools and features that are really something that you just get when you move to OCI. You wouldn't get those on-prem. On-prem, you have to procure from outside organizations to get some of these features. You just get these features as part of OCI. So load balancing, key feature, is part of not only handling performance, but also failover and high availability. They do also have a non-prod stack that sits in Ashburn, but again, this is too much details. But I thought I'd just leave it just to sort of point out how a traditional sort of footprint would look for somebody who has their primary PeopleSoft environments in one region and mostly connected that region, with a secondary region being a backup and DR strategy. So this is the way you kind of build out a DR solution for your environments. Lastly, you may have seen something like this before. Some people get confused about infrastructure as a service versus platform as a service versus software as a service. This graphic kind of shows you that when you're on-prem, you own it all. And when you move towards infrastructure as a service, and this could be not just Oracle, but AWS or Azure, you are able to then subscribe or utilize essentially virtualized compute services or servers, storage, and networking. You get those on any of the main platforms or infrastructures like Azure, Oracle, and AWS. Moving towards platform, then now you get some platform features that there's some differentiation between AWS, Azure, and Oracle. Children's is utilizing a combination of infrastructure and platform. So specifically around the database service, which is now a service that you get to utilize on the platform of OCI. That there's some key features to that, and we're gonna talk about that in their lessons learned, what they actually enjoy about using the database. And then of course, there's always the opportunity to go towards full SaaS, where it's not just the back end, but you're going towards an application. One thing I'll point out about SaaS, and this could be cloud ERP, cloud HCM, it could be Workday or anything else. At the end of the day, that's just software and just running on somebody else's data center. There's sort of this marketing around SaaS that it's magical, and then you just subscribe to it, and it's so fantastic. At the end of the day, it's just software that somebody else is managing for you on somebody else's servers. So with PeopleSoft, it's your application, but you get to leverage different infrastructure and sometimes then another organization to manage some aspects of that software for you. That's really all we're talking about when we're saying infrastructure or platform as a service. And I'm going to turn it back to Millie to talk through a little bit more about specifics around the timeline and then some of the stuff we did with PTF. So go ahead, Millie.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Cameron. Yeah. So I actually was the project manager on the project to kind of help them through all the testing cycles and so forth. So as Cameron alluded to a little bit earlier, it took children a little bit longer than I guess in today's world that we would go through a project like this. The timeline, I know it's kind of an eye chart as well. It's overall about 3.5 months to really to get through the project, and some of the delay are just kind of just the client environment in general. We had to a couple things. We had to do a lot of coordinating of the outage between the finance and HR teams. Since we were moving all the environments in parallel, it was very critical that we, coordinate with those teams as much as possible. So that really took some time and added a bit of the delay as well to the timeline. And then just the dependency on a third party being just the Fast Connect channel, right? Not so much, the tool itself, the Fast Connect tool set, but more just the pipeline, right? And getting in line with a third party vendor to get a pipeline dedicated for children's. So we that took a little bit. And then I think that the lesson learned there was just we did not engage them soon enough in the project. So that was also caused a little bit of a delay. So once again, a little longer than what we're seeing now with clients, but definitely accomplished what they needed to accomplish. So, all right, so we could go to the next slide for me, Cameron. As far as one of the key things that definitely helped accelerate the timeline, because what had happened, another reason why it took a couple months is they added extra mock conversion cutovers. They really wanted to make sure that when they cut over to the OCI environment, that business basically would not be interrupted. And to be honest with you, the only way we were able to really accomplish those additional mock cutovers in which I think is a relatively fairly quick timeline, was through leveraging the PeopleSoft test framework, right? Because I think Cameron mentioned up front, we were moving 2 production environments and 18 non-prod environments were being moved to OCI. So that's, a large number of environments. And what children's wanted to do is to make sure that when we did the conversion, we would run the PTF scripts kind of on their old on-prem environment, and when we would rerun those exact same scripts on the OCI platform, just making sure, kind of giving that 100% confidence level that nothing from a functionality perspective was being disrupted. So that using once again PTF has really provided that capability, because up to that point, before we set PTF up for children's, they were doing manual testing, so there was just no way with those number of environments that they were going to be able to do all that manual testing in such a quick time frame. So that definitely helped out a bit. So if you could go on the next slide, Cameron. As far as why use test automation just in general, obviously, so whether you're moving and PTF is obviously a good tool whether you're moving onto OCI or just applying various PUM images or whatnot. It's really a great test automation tool so that you could in a cost-effective manner implement selective, kind of do selective adoption on a more frequent and quarterly basis. Some clients, obviously, because their testing is so manual that it would take, they wouldn't upgrade for months or years and so forth. But now with leveraging of the PeopleSoft test framework, you could really accelerate the efficiency of the testing cycles and then be more current on your images. So definitely a tool that is useful for many different cases. And actually on the next slide, I have a little graphic here that kind of highlights it, in which areas you could leverage PTF for your various needs and things like that. And they basically, Children's has kind of used it for everything, for unit system integration. The only thing they obviously didn't really use it a whole lot is for the performance testing itself, right? It's not really a performance testing tool, but definitely used it almost in every test cycle. And for these mock conversion, it was just key to even keep in an accelerated timeline, even though, once again, it was a little longer than we experience with our clients these days. All right, and then on the next slide, how to use PTF. So typically, it's kind of like just like any project life cycle with coming up with a test plan, prepping the PTF environment, validating and creating scripts. And we actually SpearMC has a vast library and all the different modules and suites of PeopleSoft of pre-built test scripts that we basically load into this. We were able to load into the system at Children's and then do some modifications, obviously, for particular data elements that apply to their environment. And we were quickly up and running in no time. And then more recently, SpearMC also has our testing grounds, which is basically a bolt-on solution, a PTF bolt-on solution that even help you manage the test cycle using PTF. Because for some of you who are experienced with PTF, and especially if you used PTF a couple of years ago, it's the tool itself started a little bit kludgy, right? So it was kind of very difficult to use and maybe not as intuitive and things like that. But obviously, over the number of years, it has come a long way, and that's why SpearMC, is investing a lot of dollars in these testing grounds and coming up with additional bolt-on solutions for PTF to overcome some of its shortcomings. So one of the lessons learned, Cameron will actually get into obviously additional lessons learned, but one of them was definitely a value of using this tool, because there's just absolutely no way we would be able to get through all those test cycles in such a quick manner without it. So definitely a big benefit there. But now I will turn it over back to Cameron so you can kind of talk a little bit about some of the other lessons learned from a more perspective.
And as project manager, please jump in, Millie, and share your thoughts as well on lessons learned. Some of the ones that this is now from their perspective, children's, but also kind of our thoughts on it too. I think the success of the project and the success specifically of the cutover was really because of those multiple mock cutovers that were done, and again, that really couldn't have happened without the integration of the automated testing through PTF. So really, the things kind of led to each other and led to then a successful cutover. The team really had complementary skill sets, not just within the children's team, but also then the individuals from SPEAR-MC and from Oracle who all partnered together. And I think there was a lot of good teamwork there in terms of the ability to deal with some of the issues that were encountered and work together to resolve them. One of the things that they felt was really closer attention to the sizing of the initial architecture to make sure that it was handling the load, but not to have too much capacity. And that's really a key to moving to OCI and really to cloud infrastructure in general, is that you don't have to oversize it, which is something that typically happens on-prem, but you don't have to do that, and you shouldn't do that on cloud infrastructure. And specifically, you don't do it because of the ease of being able to scale up. And in fact, there's some great new features that are available for scaling up that I'll be talking about tomorrow in my OCI session. Millie mentioned the automated testing that was able to not only deal with feature functionality or bugs, but also performance testing. So PTF really great at being able to process the actual metric gathering around the performance testing as well. That was really great. And then, as Millie mentioned, the bottleneck and dependency on the outside third party in order to connect Fast Connect, so this is Equinix, that really delayed the project. It had the risk of actually sort of really undermining the entire project's success because of the timeline. And I think that was a lesson learned, as Millie mentioned. So not engaging early, but I'd also just point out, like I mentioned before, the need to really rationalize that. Don't just assume that you need this massive pipeline between your network and the OCI. In situations where if you work with a partner like us or Oracle and they say, oh my gosh, this is what you're doing, well, you're going to need Fast Connect, then that's fine. But don't come at it from your perspective saying, well, we just want the fastest possible pipeline. You may not need it, and you might be overspending on that pipeline, and you might be putting risk to your overall project by relying on the third party to develop that dedicated pipeline. So these were kind of the lessons learned that they found like immediately upon the project. We checked back in with them. We wanted to get kind of an update to the lessons learned, and so really 18 months later, and this is 18 months later from the go live, which I point that out because really the project started much before that. So really talking about potentials in some cases up to 2 years later from a lessons learned. But overall, kind of the conclusion here from Children's is extremely satisfied with their move to OCI. There's a possibility when you go all in on this type of major change from an infrastructure perspective, that you look back and say, was it all worth it? And did we overspend? And was it, you kind of start to second guess yourself. None of that's happened with these guys. They are so happy with it, and they just feel that it was such a good move for them. Couple of the specific reasons that they felt was really important to point out was, performance is just really, really good. I mean, after some initial, learning curve and kind of getting up to speed, learning how to manage performance on OCI. Again, that implementation, which will leverage sort of learning and equipping their employees to kind of learn OCI, has sort of resulted in the ability to manage performance and manage the infrastructure. And due to that, the performance is very, very good with OCI, with their PeopleSoft instances. So they're very happy about that. One of the bigger things is the database management side. I mentioned this previously about the ability to leverage platform services. So it's not just infrastructure. It's not just, let's get out of the data center business, let's move our application from our data center to their data center. Now, if you do that, it's fine, but you're not taking full advantage of the platform capabilities. And so one of the things that they were able to do is move towards the database cloud service on OCI. And due to that, their thought was, and their conclusion from this is, you no longer need to be a DBA with 20 years of experience plus to really be able to work with databases on OCI. Every organization has DBAs, and I don't think they're going away anytime soon. But the ability to simply subscribe to a database service, use the tools from the front end to manage that service and to get performance and security and patching, all of that out of that database is really a differentiator when you look at OCI. The upgrade from 12, I mentioned they went to 12.2. They upgrade to 19C, and they were kind of blown away with how easy it was to do it. The built-in upgrade process on OCI through that database cloud service was extremely easy to process. And if you compare it to the traditional route of upgrading databases, you're generally talking about procuring or configuring a new database server. All of that goes away when you go to the platform service. There is no server that you have to procure first and then install the database on it. You don't do any of that. You simply subscribe service. You have a database service that you're leveraging. There is no server, or at least you don't see the server where that exists. It's no longer a thing that you have to manage. And simply the elimination of the procuring, configuring the database server, managing all of the OS related elements to make sure that database exists properly on that OS and on that server, you eliminate all of that. And so the upgrades are now extremely easy from their perspective due to this pre-built process and the elimination of the need to procure that server. So due to all this, they essentially changed their whole upgrade strategy around database management. So they're actually planning on staying current. So this is not necessarily PeopleSoft, although they have a plan to stay current on PeopleSoft as well. It's really staying current with the database side as well. And so their sort of conclusion is the ability to leverage that platform service of the database cloud service on OCI is hugely important for them, and it's a differentiator. So really, to kind of, close shop on children's, with infrastructure concerns and the security and the aging infrastructure, end of life, blah, 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 with all of that being eliminated, they really are now focused on simply getting value out of their application through keeping it current, getting access to all those latest and greatest features, etc. That's their focus now, no longer burdened with aging infrastructure. And that's really key and something you should be taking away. Second, the IT organization at Children's can transition from essentially trying to just keep the lights on to really becoming a business value provider internally to their constituents within the organization. And that's really key. Too often IT organization exists, it's trying to keep all the spinning plates up, and they're not focused enough on business value because they can't. And moving to OCI allows them to focus on business value. So I'm going to move to my last one. I have just a few minutes left. I'm going to talk through a completely different approach to OCI, and that's a second case study. So we didn't mention this in the abstract, but you're getting a 2-for-1 here. You're getting a second customer story. A second customer for us, First Financial Northwest Bank, they had a different challenge. They were on a different software platform, an actual software as a service solution that really wasn't performing well. There was a lack of security, ineffective reporting, etc., and they really weren't happy with it. They had no interest, because they were coming from a SaaS, they liked PeopleSoft. They had exposure to PeopleSoft. They thought this could be a robust application for us, but we don't want servers. We don't want on-prem servers. And also, by the way, we also don't want to dedicate internal IT staff to supporting this application. We simply want to be users of this application. So they really wanted the best features of PeopleSoft and a robust financial solution. But they had no really internal PeopleSoft expertise. They didn't want to build expertise. They just wanted to be users. So in 4 months, we built out the application for them and they went live. And we only could do that because of OCI. Within a day or two of signing the contract, we had a tenancy built with servers up and running. We were doing demonstrations and trainings. We were able to capture requirements and map them to deliver functionality 100%, no customizations for these guys. And we built everything through configurable enhancements. We had disaster recovery built in. We have network connectivity. All of that was built out within 4 months. And the most important thing with a go live, it was uneventful. We went live, everything was fine. They started using the system. It was uneventful, which as someone who was intimately involved in that project and managing it, I was very happy that we had no drama. So really thinking through kind of results achieved, time-saving consolidated reporting with automatic tracking of payables, receivables, which was huge for them because they didn't have that kind of, and as a PeopleSoft customer, you're like, well, yeah, that's pretty basic. Coming from their SaaS, they didn't have that. Streamlined approval process, stringent internal controls, enhanced reporting capabilities, improve system performance and scalability and continuous patching. When I asked them, what do you think in terms of the greatest things here? They mentioned all the features in the application. I'll point that out to you because they didn't sit there and talk about the infrastructure. Why? Because we put them on OCI. Because it's not an issue for them having to deal with that. They're simply looking at the application saying, how do we get features out of this application to meet our business challenges? Not only did the implementation, but we do complete hosting managed services for them on OCI. 100% of their interaction is with home pages, tiles, and nav collections. I always put this out because their users have never even heard of the concept of breadcrumbs, and they're completely 100% fine with it. We've got SLA-driven system administration with proactive patching and maintenance. We have SLA-driven functional support where we're helping them get max value out of the application. And then we really partner with their IT group. The only thing that they do internally is reset people's passwords. That's it. They don't do anything else. They don't manage the application. We create the pipeline for them. That's it. So it's really a partnership model. It's a completely different model from Children's, where they really wanted to invest in their existing PeopleSoft staff. These guys with First Financial just wanted to use the system. Both work. OCI powers both of those strategies, and you might find yourself somewhere in the middle. That's fine too. OCI is a fantastic platform for you to move on to really support all of those use cases. And so with that, we're going to stop talking. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them into the Q&A, and we can answer those as we see them. So right now, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and click on that Q&A tab in your screen and click on Add Question. Go ahead and ask us any questions. Let me just scan the chat real quick and see if there's anything. I don't see anything. Millie, do you see anything there in terms of any questions that are being asked?
No, I was monitoring and trying the questions, so we don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. We'll give it another 30 seconds or so. And any closing thoughts, Millie, on Children's or anything with respect to OCI?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as far as, like you said, Cameron, Children's extremely happy, and they're just great team to work with, and I think in one of the lessons learned, I don't know if you mentioned, because it wasn't on the bullet, but the outage, because with all these mock cutovers that they did and preparing for the cutover, their outage lasted only 36 hours. So we were able to basically take both platforms, and move all those servers within one weekend, and not even, I think we even done Saturday night. we started a little bit earlier on Friday. I mean, it's just, it's just amazing how much, how easy it is. And then obviously, if you do the right prep and everything, it should be a really smooth transition. So for those, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I'll point out that, again, that was a completely manual lift and shift process. So that's why it took 36 hours. Some of the new automated features with zero downtime migrations and that sort of thing actually speed that up quite a bit. But yeah, at the time, because none of those features were available or in use, 36 hours was pretty impressive at that time. So that was
absolutely
great.
Thanks for qualifying that. I keep forgetting that we're talking about something that happened 2 years ago. So
yeah, I think while it did happen 2 years ago, I think it's important for people to understand because I think there's probably some maybe not trepidation is the right word, maybe that's too strong, but what's it going to look like? Do we go to OCI? What, is it going to be the right call for us? And, are we going to really be happy? Are we going to get value out of it? And I think if you look at both these organizations that we just talked about, they're extremely happy with it because they're both getting significant value with respect to security, performance, ability to stay current with the application, just focusing on the value and the solution itself versus infrastructure, which is not something that that people find a lot of value out of for the infrastructure itself. But focusing on and building out based on OCI allows you to focus on the functionality of the application, how it can solve your business challenges. So we're very pleased to work with them.
Yeah, absolutely, a big win for them on that front. Absolutely.
Okay, so one more check, and okay, so we don't have any specific questions. John has pointed out as our organizer here to make sure you fill out the evaluation form, and I think that's in the chat window. With that, I'm going to stop presenting, and we've got our contact information up there. Like I said, if you want more of a deep dive in OCI, I've got a lot of screenshots of what it looks like, what PeopleSoft and OCI looks like, Cloud Manager, some of the new features in Cloud Manager 12, and also I do chatbots on Thursday if you want to learn about chatbots. So with that, we'll close the presentation. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.